Good evening. We'll sing this song and then we'll be dismissed to our classes. As the deer pants for the water, so my soul longs after you. You alone are my heart desire, and I long to worship you. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. You're my friend and you are my brother, even though you are a king. I love you more than any other, so much more than anything. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. I want you more than gold or silver, only you can satisfy. You alone are the real joy giver and the apple of my eye. You alone are my strength, my shield. To you alone may my spirit yield. You alone are my heart's desire, and I long to worship you. You are dismissed.
Test, 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 test. Success. Look at you moving down front. Thank you so much. Hey, you back in town for a while? No? Yeah, I'm scared. Well, have you missed me? No, I'm just kidding. Before we get started, I wanted to I put out more or less a plea for constructive criticism over the first, to critique the first 2 weeks that we were together in this class. Because I was having some feelings personally about the way the class was going related to my delivery, the use of the PowerPoint and the handouts and things like that. And what I got back, and I want to thank those that did interact in that way. I really appreciate it, and I really appreciate the way that you explained your opinion. You validated what I was thinking about the class myself. So we are going to do something different. That is, I am not going to use this other than that, and we're not going to have handouts, and we're just going to talk. So if you've ever used this right here, this is Chinese. Have you used this in your last class? Did it help you? Did it? Okay, you're a better man than me. So this does not do anything for me. I guess I'm just wired different than good teachers. And I heard nothing but great things about Jim's class this past quarter. So I need to do better. And one of the goals of me teaching this quarter is to be a better teacher. So with that, I do not want to sacrifice the class for the sake of me trying to do better. I'll get that along the way. So my greatest goal is for us to have a better class and for us to understand the providence of God better than we do at the beginning of the quarter, than we do at the end. So hopefully you'll forgive me for the first 2 weeks, and we will move on as we go forward with the discussion of God's divine nature that we talked about in the first week, and how He set in motion even before, as Mel pointed out, even before creation, His providential plan. And it's an amazing thing to just stop and think about. Before He created anything, He had a plan that encapsulated getting us back to Him, because He knew, and it blows my mind that He knows what's going to happen, and He lives in a place that's not bound by time, because we are bound by time. We have this notion of time, and how time and eternity just don't go together. He's an eternal being, and we are in a time-locked universe right now, and we're going to be getting out of that as we go on into heaven. But to think about the fact that He's an eternal being, He knows all, He sees all, and He's everywhere, and yet He has a plan that is providential, which means He supplies everything we need, and because He knows what we need before we need it. But with all of that encapsulated, we are still free to make our own decisions along our life's path. And those two things meshing together are just an incredible thing for me to think about. And hopefully they challenge you to think deeper when you're alone or spending that quiet time that I keep asking you to do. How many, I'm going to ask you to raise your hand again, how many of y'all actually spent a few minutes, I'm not going to say 10 because that's a long time, I've learned, for meditation, and the word meditation scares a lot of people. How many spent some quiet time just thinking about God and His providential care for us over the past couple weeks when we weren't together? Awesome. Thank you. The hard thing, and you'll probably acknowledge this, one of the hardest things to do as we sit and contemplate things like that is to keep our mind focused, right? Because our mind wanders all over the place. So the wonderful thing is when we realize that we're wandering, to bring ourselves back. Did you experience that and how that brought you back? And that is a practice that I think we see in our lives as well, because we wander off track. And we've always got to be thinking about where we are and where we should be and how we need to get back in. And that's one of the reasons why I want us all to spend just some time every week in quiet, contemplating some of the things that I'm trying to give you as starters or places to be in thought about. And we're going to have another one this week, which is dear to me, and we'll get to that at the end of the lesson. So one of the things that has been mentioned to me from this class was that some of the thoughts about God using God's providential care isn't just for His people or Christians, but it also encapsulated Gentiles, especially the example of Rahab, right? Rahab the harlot. We say Rahab the harlot, it just rolls off our tongue. How he used people that we wouldn't even, even in our daily lives, we see people of all walks of life, and unfortunately, we categorize these people because we see them and we see the situation they're in, or what the things that they do, or the way that they carry themselves, the way they speak. And we don't know how God is using them. And so we find ourselves judging them. And we should not, because they're God's creature and they all have a soul just like we do. It's a funny thing that I spent my entire career in the construction industry, and that is a full contact sport when it comes to rough and tumble people. And I got asked many a time, how do you keep your language from just all the stuff that goes on, and it's practice. You just got to practice it, and that wasn't always that way, unfortunately. But you just practice, and that's the getting back to where we should be, right? We always want to be trying to get back and doing better about self-examining, examining ourselves. So let's start this week. We're actually going to be talking about the providence of God in the Old Testament saints. And as we know, God had a chosen family, and He used the Israelites in that path to bring Jesus to the world. He promised that, and we can read about that in Romans 9, 4 and 5. I'm sorry, where it says, Israelites to whom pertained adoption, the glory, the covenants, the giving of the laws, the service of God, and promises, of whom are the fathers, and from whom, according to the flesh, Christ came, who is over all and eternally blessed of God. We also find in Deuteronomy where He spoke, Deuteronomy 28, 1 through 4, a promise where He said, it shall come to pass if you diligently obey the voice of the Lord, to observe carefully all His commandments, which I command you today, that the Lord God will set you high above all nations of the earth, and all the blessings shall come upon you and overtake you because you obey the voice of the Lord. Blessed shall be you in the city. Blessed shall be you in the country. Blessed shall be the fruit of your body, the produce of your ground, and the increase of your herds, and the increase of your cattle, and the offspring of your flocks. So it's an amazing thing, because at this time, God is talking directly to the people and telling him, if you obey me, you get these things, right? So it's not a bad deal to hear from your Creator, if you obey me, your nation is going to be great. You're going to have blessed cities. Your country's going to be blessed. The fruit of your body is going to be blessed. Blessed, 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 blessed. Your herds, everything. But we know the Israelites just couldn't do it. Either they couldn't or they wouldn't. I think it's more of a couldn't, because they're wired, they're people wired just like we are. We try our best, and I'm going to say that, we try our best to be Christians and live and walk a walk that is what God would want us to have us do, and yet we still fail. And yet He still loves us and still has provided for us all along the way. And so when we look at the way that God provided for them, we've always got to think about the same thing for us. God has provided for us. I'm just going to leave it there. But the point I'm wanting to get to here is I want to talk about the fall of Jerusalem. And I'm going to talk about this. It's Second Chronicles, 36, verses 15 and 16. And this has to do with the way that sometimes we see history and we're in the middle of it and we don't understand what's going on or where God's taken us. So let's just read it. Verse 15, and the Lord God of their fathers sent warnings to them by His messengers, rising up early and sending them, because God had compassion on His people and on His dwelling place. But they mocked the messengers of God, despised His words, and scoffed at His prophets, until the wrath of the Lord rose against His people, till there was no remedy. So the thing I want for us to look at and us to consider is, how did the people that had all these promises get into this state? We've got to back up a verse to verse 14. And it says, moreover, all the leaders of the priests and all the people transgressed more and more according to the abominations of the nations, and defiled the house of the Lord, which He had consecrated in Jerusalem. So what I want to talk about, or let us think about, because we don't talk in the auditorium, what I want us to think, thank you, is we've got to remember the importance of leadership. And I say this because I am a supposed leader here with the title of an elder or shepherd or whatever best describes the position that I've held for 10 years here. But we've got to always be careful, and that's on you guys to always be watching the leadership. It's upon you just as much as it is upon me to be watching all the time the leadership. God has given us radar. Many times I sit in a meeting, in an elders meeting, and my radar goes up and it's like, okay, what's going on? right? And then we start having a discussion about a particular thing. And more times than not, something wacky's going on. Mel, I'm sure you've had the same thing. When you were an elder here, I'm sure you had times when discussions were going on and it just didn't feel right or didn't sound right. And that turned into discussions or, thank goodness we don't have yelling matches in the eldership. But it turns into something that you've got to vet out. So we not only do we need to watch to make sure the leadership is solid, but we've also got to guard the pulpit, because if the eldership is not ready to guard the congregation like they should be, then they'll let anybody preach anything, right? We have a great preacher here, and Keegan does a great job too, and it hurts me to say that, but because he knows that I joke with him so much. But Rex puts in hours and hours of time to develop his lessons, and as you've heard him say here recently, he develops lessons 6 months in advance. And it's odd the way sometimes the timing of his lessons works out perfectly for the situation that's going on. All that being said, it's still up to us to check it. We've still got to check his message. We've still got to check what he's talking about, his references, make sure he's on track. That's still upon us as leaders, you as leaders, and you as just congregation. We've got to make sure that our deacons and elders are properly qualified. I can tell you that when we've put out the announcement in the past for elders and deacons, I was a deacon at the time, and they put out a call for elders and deacons. We had ladies' names put forward as elders. And the first thing we know about an elder is he has to be the husband of one wife. So how does that work? So first of all, we've got to know our Bible. We've got to know their qualifications. And that is incumbent upon each of us to do that. It doesn't take a group. It doesn't take a lot of people to guard the church. It just takes a few. And that few could include you. It could just be me. But if you hold back what you're thinking, then you're not guarding the church. And I'll put out a note right now. If you feel like something's going wrong with the church, please come to the eldership and discuss it. We are up for anything. We have I say we don't have an open door. We just don't have a door. I personally, if you want to talk to me offline sometime, I am up for anything. You can yell at me. I don't care. If that's your passion and that's the way you deliver your message, I do not care. The thing that I care about is the church. And if I'm doing something wrong, then I need to straighten it out. And if the eldership is doing something wrong, then we need to straighten it out. There is no ego. It is the church first, and we need to protect it. I'm going to move on. Any questions, comments about the church leadership, our responsibilities in that? You're late. Okay, so Israel had this horrible attitude towards God, and so God had to. It's just like our kids when they have a bad attitude or don't want to obey. We have to punish them, right? We have to punish them. God had to punish the Israelites. And so his way of punishing them at that time was to send them into captivity. But we don't just punish our kids to be beaten on the kids. We don't just, if you don't spank your kids, then you don't get that. But we used to spank our kids. It didn't hurt them. Like I told my wife, they're born with a crack in their butt, so you can't break it. That's the only place we ever spanked them was in their rear end. So, but you spank them to correct them because you love them, and that's a hard message to get across until they're older. But it's the same way with God and His people. He had to punish them to correct them so that they would live for Him again. So God sent His people to the Babylonian captivity for 70 years. This weather has me messed up. Sorry about that. I apologize. Just as predicted in Jeremiah 25:11 and 12, He told them He was going to send them into captivity, and He did just that. But at the end of the 70 years of captivity, God again allowed His people to return home so that they could prepare for a time when Christ was going to be born. And in Ezra 1 and 2, it says, "Now in the first year of King Cyrus of Persia, that the word of the Lord be by the mouth of Jeremiah might be fulfilled, the Lord stirred up the spirit of King Cyrus of Persia." Now King Cyrus was not an Israelite. He was a Gentile. But God stirred up his spirit so that he made a proclamation through all of his kingdom and also put it in writing, saying, "Thus says the king of Persia, all the kingdoms of the earth of the Lord God of heaven have given me. He has commanded me to build him a house in Jerusalem, which is in Judea." So there again, we have God using Gentiles for His own purpose. Questions, comments, sign language, anything? All right. Now, probably one of my favorite stories, turning to another story, is the history of Joseph. Just because Joseph went through so much, and there's you can find the history of Joseph in Genesis chapters 37 through 50. And to me, his story is a great representation of God's providence all the way through it. All the way through it. Being hated by his brothers. He was obviously his father's favorite, and he knew it, and he rubbed it in, which helped his brothers to hate him even the more. The way he shared his dreams about how at some point his brothers were going to bow down to him. All of these things only promoted or fueled their hatred. So what did they do? They said, "Let's get rid of him." So they sell him into slavery. He was about 17. They sell him into slavery and concoct a story. So his dad thinks he's been eaten by lions or something, but his dad thinks he's dead. So at this point, what's God's providence? Do you see any of God's do we see any of God's providence at this point? I mean, it's just a family of brothers that hate each other, right? There's no, what's the point at this point? If you didn't know the rest of the story, what would you think the point of this would be? But Joseph lands in the house of Potiphar, right? He winds up ascending to a high position in Potiphar's house And Potiphar's wife comes on to him. And of course, Joseph, being who Joseph is not going to succumb to her advances. And then because of that, she accuses him of rape, basically rape. And it's either Potiphar believes her or Potiphar believes Joseph. And you know how that's going to work. I'm going to believe my wife over a slave. So at that point, he gets thrown into jail. And so, I mean, what is Joseph thinking? All of this stuff throughout my entire life has not gone the way that I would expect it to go, right? Nobody loves me at home. My life here, it was kind of going good, but now I'm sitting in a jail. I mean, but still he doesn't turn his back on God. He still is on God. Go ahead. Right. God meant it for good. Right. That's right. Exactly. And so, so he jumped forward. Thank you very much, but that's okay. So all the way through here, Joseph has the ability, or the opportunity, I should say, to reveal the meaning of Pharaoh's dream. Pharaoh had a dream, and Joseph disseminates the dream for him about a famine that's coming, 7 years that's going to be very prosperous, 7 years of famine, all that. So Pharaoh puts him in charge of collecting all the food and putting it away and all that stuff. So turns out that Joseph's family needs food, has to come to the feet of Joseph to eat. And they bowed down in front of him, just like his dream. And then because of that, because of the end story, this is a very high level overview of the story. They get moved they moved to Egypt, which was prophesied to Abraham in Genesis 15:13 through 16. Then God said to Abraham, "Know for certain that your descendants will be strangers in a land that is not theirs, and will serve them, and they will afflict them for 400 years." So the ultimate end game of this entire story with Joseph was his family came to Egypt. And as the pharaohs changed, they forgot about who Joseph was. They forgot about all the things that the Israelites did in his family, and they became fearful of the Israelites because they were very prolific at having kids, and they began to grow as a nation in their presence. So they became slaves. And that period of time lasted 430 years, depending on who you talk to. But if you talk to Exodus 12:40, it says 430 years. And in verse 41, it came to pass that at the end of the 430 years, they came out, and the army of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. So, is providence, my question is providence just a point of view? Right. Right. A lot of times I say that while in Egypt, they were galvanized as a nation, right? They became galvanized as a nation. Anybody else? So, different points of view, right? So from Joseph's point of view, was he doing anything other than saving his family? In Joseph's sandals, was he doing anything other than saving his family and serving Pharaoh? Really? Right. Yeah. But what is the good just saving his family? Serving good, yeah, absolutely. Well, true that. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yes, go ahead.
From God's perspective,
Right.
is Joseph a figure to save Israel, or is Joseph a figure to ensure that Jesus gets here through the line of Judah?
Both.
So if you think about the history of Genesis, Genesis has basically got three major characters. You have Abraham, Isaac is mentioned, but he's sort of a
He's kind of,
figure
yeah.
to Jacob.
Mm-hmm.
And then we get to the sons of
Right.
Jacob, and the focus is not on Judah, through which Jesus comes, the focus is on Joseph. Why? Because he preserves the seed of one promised from Genesis 3.
Mm-hmm.
The proliferation of a nation, doesn't that go back to the garden and what God told man from the beginning? Be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth.
Sure.
It wasn't about military might. It wasn't about, because he didn't need the military might.
Right, right, right. No, I agree with you. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. No, he doesn't need the military might, but the Egyptians thought of it that way. They became scared of the Israelites because they were getting to be so numerous, right? That's what the.
They weren't scared enough to let him go.
No, that's true. Yeah, they weren't scared enough to let him go. Yeah. Yeah, true. Yeah. Anybody else? Okay. We can't help but mention also Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And about, as I was saying, it doesn't take a whole bunch of people to stand up against a wrong. In this case, it was just three guys. They weren't going to bow down to the idol, and in that way, they were punished, or they thought they were going to be, or the king thought they were going to be punished and thrown into the furnace. But if they were to bow down, they would have broken the first commandment of the Ten Commandments, right? You shall not have any other gods before me. So they were standing for what God had told them not to do, not to have any other gods before them. But we know that because of their fortitude, they made a great impact on Nebuchadnezzar. And after pulling them out of the furnace, because he saw 4 people in there, not just 3, he made a decree. And he said, I make a decree that any people, nation, or language which speaks anything amiss against God, the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, shall be cut in pieces, and their houses shall be made an ash heap, because there is no other God who can deliver like this. Then he promoted Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego in the province of Babylon. So, like I was saying before, It doesn't take a lot of people. It just takes the one or a few. And I think we've seen that even in our own history about if one stands up, then others will follow, right? We've seen that play out not even, well, I can't get into that. It's funny, I wrote down here, you can either be an example or a warning. So that was a t-shirt I saw one time. Always liked that t-shirt. So as Christians, when we became Christians and were baptized, we should have made the decision to be that one. We're going to live for Christ. We didn't know all the ramifications of that maybe, but as we grew in our knowledge, we should have grown in our fortitude towards being more, because as we learn more, we should want to be more, because as we learn more, we learn how God has loved us so much and given us the ability to be with Him, about just the gospel story of how Christ came to earth and gave Himself. That's motivational, right? That's motivational, and how He will save us from our sins and wash them away, because the plan God set in place for us from before the beginning, to quote Mel again. But if we don't stand up and we let things just go by, then I will say again, we have lost our influence. And that's hard to get back. Once you let that ease off, then it's hard to push it back over, because everybody else is going to make you stay over there. That's where society is going to want to make you stay. So if I have a drink, alcohol I'm talking about, if I have an alcoholic drink and somebody here sees me do that, my influence is damaged. Period. It is. Because anybody in the world can have a drink. I'm not going to drink. I don't drink. Because, I've had this conversation with a few people here lately, because they don't understand the concept of why I don't drink. And I'll just say, because the concept is, I don't get drunk. Well, the point is, drunkenness is a process. The process starts with your first drink. And it's not just when you get to a point. Even the world knows that drunkenness is a process. That's what the breathalyzer is for, to measure how drunk you are. You can be under the legal limit of drunkenness and still drive a car, but there's a window in there where you are impaired, but you're not impaired enough. So drunkenness, you are impaired. You start being impaired the moment you take an alcoholic drink. I'm not going to do it. But if I go to a party and I have a drink, my influence is different now. I can't influence people the same way, because they know who I am and what I'm supposed to stand for in the church. And I can't do it. The good thing is I don't like to do it either, so it makes it easier than anything else. Any questions, comments? I opened up a bag of worms there. Nope. The last character tonight I want to talk and look at is Esther. Esther is a really neat story. The book is great. If you want to read, it's only, I think, 10 chapters long. Is it 10 or 12? 10. 10 chapters long. The interesting thing about Esther, the book of Esther, is God is never mentioned in the book, which is a little interesting thing. but you can see God all the way through it. AJ and I were talking the other day about there is no such thing as luck. There are things within Esther that somebody might say is lucky or luck or happenstance, but the way it all turns out, none of it is luck. So just to a Reader's Digest version of the whole thing, there's four basic main characters. We've got Xerxes, who's the king of Persia. And as you read through there, you might want to, he's drunk a lot. So this guy's drunk a lot, makes a lot of hasty decisions. Haman, who is a Persian official. The one characteristic about Haman is he's a very egotistical man. And that plays a big part into his life and his demise. He hates the Jews, just to give you a little insight into Haman. And then the other two characters are Mordecai, who is the uncle of Esther. And Esther is an orphan that Mordecai takes in for his own. So the beginning of the story, just as an overview, King Xerxes is throwing a couple of feasts, and these things last 187 days. So it's party time in the kingdom. And at the end of these feasts, the king, in his stupor, asks his reigning queen, Vashti, to come out and show herself off because she's so pretty. She refuses to do that. I guess there's some bit of modesty within her. And so because she does that, she is dethroned. And Xerxes starts a beauty contest throughout the kingdom to find a new replacement queen. Esther enters the pageant. Of course, that was kind of an interesting thing because I don't think they were expecting a Jew to enter the pageant. And the preparation for the women took about 12 months to prepare each contestant for being presented before the king. Anyway, at the end of this whole thing, Esther wins the crown and becomes the new queen. So keep that in your mind. Flip over, and then outside, Mordecai, Esther's uncle, overhears a couple guys plotting to kill the king. So he goes and reveals this information and stops the assassination. So he's a good guy. Meanwhile, sounds like a soap opera, doesn't it? Meanwhile, Haman, who hates all the Jews, gets to the king and talks him into creating a decree to where Haman can go off and kill all the Jews throughout Persia on a particular day. In preparation for the big, I call it kill day here, on the big day for the massacre, Haman builds a gallows specifically for Mordecai because Mordecai didn't bow down to him on a particular day. Just because he didn't show fear towards Haman. So he builds a gallows specifically for Mordecai. Switch again. The king is having a sleepless night and calls for the reading of the history so he can get back to sleep, and discovers that Mordecai was never rewarded for the part he played in thwarting the king's assassination attempt. So he decides to call Haman in for advice on how to honor Mordecai, but he doesn't tell him who he's trying to honor. When the king explains to Haman that he neglected to reward a particular person, the king asked Haman what he should do for the man. With his egotistical view of himself, Haman creates a plan to be led through the city on one of the king's horses, and we'll have one of the king's noblemen have a proclamation as he pulls them through the city, thinking all the while that he was going to be on the horse. The king thinks it's a great idea and points out, and at this point tells Haman to do everything he suggested, but do it for Mordecai, which just, I'm sure, floors Haman. But he does it all. And now we've got to jump to another scene. Mordecai, because the edict was still out there for all the Jews to be killed, goes to Esther and says, you've got to go before the king, even though you're not invited. You've got to go before the king and stop this massacre. And she says in Esther 4:14, if you remain completely silent at this time, relief and deliverance will arise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. Yet who knows whether you have come to this kingdom for such a time as this? So, placing his faith in God, Mordecai urges Esther to go before the king and basically sacrifice death to stop this massacre. So what Esther does is she invites the king and Haman to a couple of feasts, which Haman just jumped all over because he was, who he was. And in the process of doing that, she reveals that Haman that she was Jew, and that Haman was going to kill all the Jews. So the king then winds up putting Haman on the gallows built for Mordecai. So it's a big circle, if I even did it justice in explaining all that. So, a few stories. The story of Esther has a few lessons for us that we really should keep in mind as far as God's providence, no luck. One that is special to me, even though I don't have an adopted child, I think adopted children are really special, and the people that adopt them are really special people. And I know that Mordecai had to be special in that way to take care of Esther. So I know he's a special kind of breed of man. The world has always had men that will hate God's people. That goes for back then, and it goes for today. And I think the further down the line we get in our own history, I think we're going to see more and more of that. Just the way society is going, I think we're going to become bigger and bigger targets. And as we become more successful here with spreading the gospel and the truth, I think we're going to become a target here, to be honest with you. We also know that God will always deliver the righteous from the wicked. That has not always seemed to be. I think of the martyrs that we know about in the New Testament times. But ultimately, that the martyrs galvanized the movement. I think helped galvanize the movement. They gave strength to the people that watched. There's value in some of that I just can't fathom the people that were put to death because of their faith. But here's the thing: we're still talking about it today. It has that type of value, and we know that Mordecai had an unshakable trust in God. He was just, there's something about him that was just he was an amazing man. So next week, that's the end of our lesson this week. Wow, I'm right on time. Any questions, comments before I get to the last thing? Next week, we're going to talk about God's providence in the New Testament saints. But this week, I want to try to focus our minds on our quiet time, not our meditation, but our quiet time, to think about the first families of Belsholz. And that's why I said these are near and dear to me, because I knew all of these people. I'm about to read off their names. There's only 2 of them left. But they did something special. They launched out. They didn't have, they had to find a place to worship in a schoolhouse. They didn't have they didn't have anything except themselves and the gospel. And here we are today because of them. So think about how you were blessed by these people. You don't even know their names. Think about how you were blessed by these people when you're sitting quietly thinking. Jack and Louise Key. You still know Louise. You know Louise Key. Pascal and Sally Smith. He was one of our first elders. Sally was just a sweetheart. Just a sweetheart. Fred and Bonnie Klaus. Fred was my father. He was also one of our first elders. Bonnie is still here. Clinton and Carolyn Thomas. We lost both of them last year. So most of y'all may know them. And then the other couple was Dale and Marjorie Koa, which probably none of you have heard those names. But these 5 families came together out of necessity. Instead of driving to Tampa 3 times a week, some of them were going down to Manhattan Avenue. Some of us were going to Florida Avenue, which was 45 minutes one way. And it was 3 times a week. I mean, period, 3 times a week. Doors were open, we were there. And they launched out. And because of their sacrifice and I don't know if they had a forethought of what was going to happen and what we're going to be today. But I am indebted to these people, all of them. Anyway, if you could think about those people when you're sitting quietly and what they have meant to you, even though you don't know them, I think it might bless your heart. So with that, let's close. Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you so much for your plan and your providence for us, the way that you've given us the Bible and shared the providence that you've guided all along the way. God, we cannot understand it all, but we believe you and we believe in you, and we want to ask you that when we have failures in our own, that you help us to get back on track and that we get our minds right all the time. Dear Father, thank you for all the help you give us and all the things you provide. In Christ's name, amen. You are dismissed. Thank you so much. Yeah. always looking back. You never know. I think that's what it is. Sorry about that. I'll look. Right. Right. No, you're right. You're right. No, you're right. I don't understand that.
Every once in a while, 6 or 8 months, seems like I talk to somebody about, no,
See you on Saturday, right? Lord willing.